Hey everybody! Today we're here with Galactic Center Diaries, and Cassandra, the Saffron Sage, has wanted to come on and talk about her own Galactic Center experience. And I'm really thankful that you want to do this because yeah, I'm interested to see what you have to say to the questions that I ask about your GC placements. You have the Sun conjunct the GC. It's like right on it. And you have Neptune at 3 degrees Capricorn, which is still within that orb that I'm looking at, 10 degrees applying and separating. And Venus and Uranus are at 18 degrees Sagittarius. Yes, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start. I really am excited. I had a lot of fun doing my own of these, so I really am excited that you wanted to come play and answer. Okay, let's talk about the Sun conjunct the Galactic Center. So the Sun is its identity, its ego, its life force, its vitality, it's all these things. I'm wondering, because the GC has so much energy, right? Like there's so much energy at the GC. For anybody that's just now watching, this is GC is a giant black hole. And it kind of mutates, warps, distorts, electrifies, charges, transforms, things that happen to actually fall into the GC in space, right? This is what it, and then it kind of gives birth to new things. So it makes me think that if a planet is conjunct this in a chart, that it kind of does this kind of thing to the planet, right? Kind of almost birthing something new, if you will. So with your Sun conjunct the GC, I'm wondering about vitality specifically here. Like it seems like energy, for instance. Like you could go through periods of your life where there is like a massive amount of energy, like personal energy, personal vitality, massive amounts. And then there might be periods where there isn't quite as much, where it kind of dips. Do you have any experience with anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have had times where it's interesting. I would say more like in early life, I had like no energy, where I would just like feel like I had no life force energy and had to like drag myself out of bed sometimes. And it'll also happen like on a daily basis too, where my energy levels, they will fluctuate. They are not ever consistent. It's always either I'm really low energy or like maybe later in the day I'll be more high energy because of something that just happened that like made me more motivated, and then maybe I'll dip down again. And it's not something that I can do a whole lot to control, other than, one thing that's kind of off topic, but helped, was that I learned that I'm a manifesting generator, and that for manifesting generators in human design, oh, cool. We are charged up by the right work. And so that's kind of part of why I focus so much on trying to do work that is in alignment so that I am not depleted all of the time. But I would say so far, mostly it's been more of the lack of energy that I felt, and just, being very, very introverted, needing a lot of time to recover if I do something that's like really, like if I were to go on stage or something, like I'd have to go home and then I'd have to rest, like just like that need to almost like build up the energy in order to have it. And I'm hoping that as I go throughout my life, that builds and I have more vitality and life energy, right? And I can just do more. But people don't see that because they only see me when I'm out and I'm like bubbly and happy, or when I'm on a video and I'm at my most energized. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, your that makes sense that being more introverted, with your Sun in the fourth house, it definitely does make sense to me that you might just naturally be more that way. I almost wonder if the GC, it could also, how to like suck the vitality from your Sun.
That's what it feels like. I mean, it does feel like, especially when I think of like when I was younger, I just had no energy, and I just like couldn't be bothered to do anything, and I just I mean, thinking about it, there have been so many times in my life where like my lack of energy stopped me from doing something that I wanted to do. And so that, I mean, that does feel really, really accurate to me.
That's well, it's good to hear that because it makes, well, I mean, I'm sorry about the lack of energy. I don't mean like that's good to hear that, but it's good to hear that I'm on the somewhat of the right track here.
Totally, totally.
um okay. So the next one I'll ask, sorry, I'm not I don't usually read from notes, so I'm like okay. So you also have the GC conjunct your IC. IC is like the core of one's being, right? Like the most private, most personal, consciously private and personal place in the chart. It can also, if you're using Placidus, it'll be on the cusp of the fourth house. So which the fourth house also deals with home and family, but we'll get to that question in just a few minutes. Okay. Do you ever feel like there is anything going on with you at your core that is like private and personal? It's not something that you advertise, so I'm not sure how you necessarily feel about being asked this question right now, but where you feel like something at your core is kind of distorted or mutated, and this doesn't have to be in a bad way. I don't mean it in a negative way necessarily. I just can't really think of any better words to use. But yeah, like there's something kind of mutated or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I've always felt different, right? And I've always had like certain, I don't know, I would say like just several layers of me that make me different than whoever I'm around. And so that's one way I can relate to that, is just feeling kind of different than other people, not feeling accepted in general, or feeling like if people knew everything about me, they wouldn't like me. Like when somebody does like me, I feel like they don't know all of me. That kind of thing does sort of come up, or just like a general feeling like sometimes even with my like, and this is something I've worked on quite a bit, but even with like the things that I am good at, sometimes I won't see that necessarily, or I'll feel like it makes me weird, like I'll be like, I'm so weird because I do astrology, but really it's not really a flaw,
No, not at all.
but it's like, it's something that I'll see things about myself that make me unique. I will see them as flaws, or I'll more easily see, and this is just something I've had to work on through years of like self-development and self-growth, but I'll notice as well that like when I'm in a situation, even like a situation like this where we're doing some videos together, sometimes I will leave the situation only thinking of the thing that I felt like was wrong about it, And so there is this sort of distortion of my perception of myself where I will just grab onto that one little thing that wasn't right. And no matter how many times other people will say, no, it was so good, there, like it kind of blows it up in my head a little bit. And so, I mean, I'm a much better about this now, and I've worked on like countering that natural tendency. But I would say that throughout much of my life, I have actually felt like there's something wrong with me, and like sort of carried out around that feeling.
Let me ask, because your Jupiter's in the fifth house, correct?
Yes.
I don't have your chart pulled right, but it's in the fifth house. It's in Aquarius, right?
Yes.
Okay. So okay, because since Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, where the GC is, does creative self-expression, fifth house, does that help you to kind of see things more clearly, or perhaps less distorted, do you think? Or even things like taking risks? I don't know if taking risks fits in necessarily. For some reason, that's one of the other ones that comes to mind. But creative self-expression.
I think so. I mean, even when I was young, I would write poetry about how sad I was.
Oh,
Like in middle school, I would just need some kind of creative outlet. And for a while I was writing music like a little bit. Not I didn't do that for a long time, but I was like playing my guitar and singing a bit during a phase of my life. And now it's more like making YouTube videos. So I think that, yeah. And even when I was young, like I remember when I was like 9, I was in a play, and it wasn't like anyone in my life was telling me to go do that. Like, no one was like, you need to get on stage. There was a play and I was like, I want to be in it, And so I think that yes, creative self-expression has been like a method of just a thing that I've done, that has never, I don't know, it's just always been part of who I am, I feel like.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure. Yeah. I have no doubt about, especially, I mean, just even with the fourth house bending to the fifth. Yeah, I'm sure it is. It seems like it would be a vehicle to ease some of that or make some of that distortion or mutating or whatever easier somehow, easier to deal with, handle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is a bit of an outlet, and I guess it does because I can feel like even if I feel different or weird or, bad, I can go make a video about it, or I can, like help someone with that sort of whatever the pain is that I've had. I think that's part of why I like doing what I do, is because I want to use it's like it's fuel, the weirdness that I feel or whatever. It becomes fuel to want to do something with it. Like I want to do something with it.
I almost feel like, I mean, Jupiter's in Aquarius, and Aquarius deals with astrology, right? It almost seems like
Yes.
this in and of itself is a wonderful creative outlet for you. And that, yeah, seems like it would be.
It does. It actually, when I started really doing astrology and like doing more readings on people, it felt like coming home. It just felt like I've never. It took me a really long time, but it's very soothing to my soul to be able to do it.
That's love. I feel the same way. I totally get it. It is a very nice feeling. It is. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm going to ask about the IC conjunction in a more family and home context. Was your family experience a little different? Is there anything warped, distorted, mutated, or anything along those lines surrounding notions of family and home for you?
Yeah, and so I love this question because it's so accurate. And there's just a couple kind of major things that made my family life quite different and not normal. So the first one was that I lived with my mom until I was 9, and then my mom left, and I went to live with my dad and my stepmom. And so immediately, it was just there. It felt like a distortion. It just was like, I became the kid whose mom left, and it just was really unconventional. Like that year, I moved a few times, and it just, it made me. It was just like I felt different because of that, right? Because of that situation. And then when I was 14, I got sober. And so that ended up being a very distorted, weird thing between me and all the rest of my family who didn't really, um, they didn't get it. They didn't understand why I needed to be sober. And so I felt at that time like it kind of drove a wedge from between me and the rest of my family just because I had chosen this different lifestyle that was so not expected, and being so young as well. I feel like this kind of distorted my whole childhood in a way. And I don't mean that to make it sound worse than it is, but just that like there's some things you need to face when you get sober that like 14-year-olds probably shouldn't have to do. And so there was a lot of, I had so much responsibility put on me by being in recovery that young. And I was also really kind of looked up to in my community for it. Like I wrote a poem for the drug court I graduated from, and they still read it there. And so I got like all this sort of attention and like praise, and was like known in the community. But then I also ended up doing Running Start when I was in my last 2 years of high school, partly because I didn't really have friends, like most of my friends were like 30-year-olds. And it was just a very, sorry, what?
What is Running Start?
Oh, that's like when you are in high school and you go to college.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I just wanted
So
to.
yeah, no, it's okay. So yeah, so I was going to college when I was like 16 and 17, which
Awesome.
was awesome and I
Yeah.
loved it. But also it was just kind of a lonely experience of life to to be so different in so many ways. And then, and then I ended up moving to South Korea in my early 20s. And so even though that's not really my childhood, I still feel like it sort of was another way that I felt separate or kind of different than the people I grew up with who were just so happy being where they were and like going camping on the weekends and like, it felt like everyone else settled down and had kids and I was the only one who like needed to explore and be different like that. So my whole life has felt like the theme has been about like differentiating myself in some way, whether I want to or not. It's just like what's by following my own path.
It's taking you that way. Yeah. No, I understand. That makes sense. And yeah, it does sound, yeah, it sounds like your home life growing up was definitely different for sure. So yeah, this feels like that where my mind is going with this definitely fits here. Um, okay. The question about, okay, so I have this, just in case anybody hadn't seen it in some of the other videos, I have this theory, and again, it is just a theory. I'm just fucking with shit here. But I do have this idea that planets that are conjunct the GC, that are direct, the GC kind of flips them and turns them retrograde. Not literally turns them retrograde, but the way that they function then is more like a retrograde planet. Now, I would say the same thing about retrograde planets conjunct the GC. It might flip them and make them more direct. Now, I don't have as much, now the flipping from direct to retrograde, that I have more research on. More participants have planets direct conjunct the GC. That then the way that the person talks about the planets tends to be a little bit more like you talk about a retrograde planet. I don't have as many examples of people with retrograde planets conjunct the GC. So I don't know total. I guess it's just a theory of mine that it might flip. If it's direct, it'll flip it to retrograde. If it's retrograde, it'll flip it to direct. So you have Neptune at 3 degrees Capricorn, which is within that window of orb I'm looking at. You have Venus and Uranus at 18 degrees, which is also within that window of orb I'm looking at. And I guess I'm wondering, now they are further out, so the impact here might not be as strong. But I do wonder if there is anything that ends up, those planets end up functioning a little bit more like a retrograde planet would. Like, for instance, Neptune retrograde. Neptune retrograde wants to, a lot of things, connect to source is a big one. But it might do it a little differently because we are talking about a retrograde planet. It's going to do it a little differently, but the connection to source is still very important. Another big one is breaking through illusions and delusions and things, breaking through, Neptune can be kind of unclear, breaking through those sorts of things. Neptune retrograde generally wants to do this. Venus retrograde. You got Venus retrograde. It points more towards Taurus than it does to Libra. So there is more of a self-focus. Self-love is usually very important for Venus retrograde people. It's usually very hard to come by. It's not, generally Venus retrograde people don't, they have issues loving themselves completely. And it can also feel rather lonely because the values are usually different. Venus retrograde tends to value things that most of society would not. They might also value things about themselves that the rest of the world may not. And the rest of the world may value things about the person. And they're like, I don't know why you value this. You know what I mean? Uranus retrograde can deal with trauma. Well, Uranus deals with trauma anyway, but like the trauma is usually very internalized because retrogrades turn the energy inward. Also, the Uranus retrograde needs to be able to see things from a bird's eye point of view, but not just from, sometimes there's an issue though here with not bringing themselves into the equation when they see from a bird's eye point of view. Like they need to be able to see themselves and like from the gods view, right? See everything. And sometimes there can be issues with that. So I guess I'm wondering if any of those planets function a little bit more that in those ways?
Yeah, I mean, the one that sort of I resonate the most with of all three that you're talking about is Venus, because I definitely feel like my values are a little bit different than a lot of people's, and I'm not in a rush to do anything about that. um, I'm not trying, I just have no desire to go fix that.
Yeah.
Or to like fall in line or try to fit in. I don't like that I don't fit in, but I also am not going to change to fit in. Like I'm not, that's just not, it's not something I desire. But definitely have felt like my values are different than a lot of people's, and um, will find that if I really let people get to know me, they just don't they'll try to make me be like them. And I don't like that. I'm not going to be like other people. And I've always really struggled understanding that the fact that people want everyone else to be like them. Like, why can't I just be myself? I always feel like that. Like, why can't you just let me be? I'm not going to be stronger. I'm not going to be more direct. I'm going to be who I am. So I'm okay with that. But other people seem to not be in certain situations. And so, I mean, I relate to that sort of that loneliness or the isolation from the Venus retrograde as being just valuing different things, um, and not wanting to change that. Like, I'm not going to change what my values are. And, like one of the things I really value is like compassion,
Okay.
and like how people treat each other.
Yeah.
But then that doesn't mean I'm always nice or anything, but just that like I value not being mean.
Yeah.
And the world doesn't necessarily care, the world doesn't necessarily share in that value, and I'm sure there's several things like that. What'd you say?
The world's a mean fucking place.
It is.
A lot of the time.
It is.
Yeah, no, I understand what you, yeah.
And so I find that people will accept like abuse, or people will accept stuff like that in groups, and I'm like, what is wrong with all of you? like I don't understand. Like this, it blows my mind that someone's not like, I'm going to speak up. And then what you said about other people seeing things that I'm like, what? I think that I relate to that when it comes to a lot of people will tell me I'm brave or I have courage because I have a YouTube channel, because I lived in another country, or I travel a lot. And I'm like, what? I don't see that. I don't see that as brave. I just kind of what I do.
Yeah. It's part of you, which actually makes sense because Venus is so close to the IC. It is part of you. But yeah, so you might not see it that way. Other people see it that way. Other people might value that about you, but to you, it's just part of you. And it's just, yeah.
And I would never, if someone asked me to describe myself, I would never say I have courage. Like that wouldn't be what I identify as or identify with, but it's something that other people often will say. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, no, I understand. Uh-huh.
And then, oh, sorry, you also talked about the Neptune being like spiritual. Definitely breaking delusions is something that, I mean, it's been a theme in my life, but I feel like it hasn't been a good one. Because like I've had to break a lot of my own delusions, a lot of my own sort of illusions about who I think people are versus who they really are, or who I am versus who I think I am, and just have to face a lot of, like, it's almost like life has been a series of real talk where I'm like, oh man, I am like that, and maybe on some level that's true for everyone, where we learn and then we grow and we realize we were wrong and then we do it again. But this feels like a stronger theme in my life, where even when I was young, I would put someone on a pedestal and get really, really crushed when they weren't who I thought they were. And so I've gone through that sort of similar energetic situation in several different ways in my life, where something was put on a pedestal and then I had to realize it wasn't what I thought, or I'm not who I thought I was.
That sounds, to me, that sounds very something that Neptune retrograde wants to understand more about, like, and perhaps even finding yourself in situations where it kind of forces you to do that, as difficult, as that is. It does that. Yeah. 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 Okay, so we'll go on to the last one, which is about your midheaven, which is conjunct the Galactic Anti-Center. Okay, so just quickly, the Galactic Anti-Center is a place in the chart. It is a real place in the sky. It's an area of the sky that's very calm, but it is covered by a bunch of literal space dust. Like that's how they describe it. It's covered in space dust. And there is a very bright star right next to it. But this bright star does not like illuminate the Galactic Anti-Center, sorry. It doesn't illuminate it though. It blinds it to where it's not seen. The other thing about the Galactic Anti-Center is that it's in the zone of it's in what's called the zone of avoidance, and it can't be seen from Earth easily. That is interesting about it. It happens to be in this place. So I guess my question here is, was career or is career, or has it been, and like the highest and most idealized version of yourself, which is kind of how I think of the midheaven. Was it always clear to you, or was it kind of hazy or covered by space dust or blinded? And when I say hazy, I don't mean like 12th house haze or lack of clarity. It's just kind of covered in dust. It can still be seen, but it's covered in dust.
Yeah. I mean, definitely can relate to that as far as it not being seen from Earth. That made me laugh. Because when I was young, I just wanted to prove myself. I had no idea what I was good at or what I wanted to do. So I just kept trying different jobs and just would like go from job to job and like really thought that I was going to be happy if I just found the right job. But I didn't know how to like identify what I wanted, or let myself even do the things I wanted to do. So I was kind of closed off to my own desires for a long time in life. And so career always felt elusive. It always felt like something other people got to have, and I just had to get stuck in a job. And every job, even if it was a little bit better, I would always just feel like I'm so stuck in this job. I hate this job so much. I would hate every job I had. And it hasn't been until more recently that I felt like I'm finally on the right path. And like, I know I'm doing what I want to be doing. So that's cool. But there's always sort of this confusion. It's so interesting because when I'm really like clear, I know what I'm doing and I know what direction I'm heading. But it's like, if you ask me to visualize my life in 10 years, I don't know that I could ever do that and have it ever be real, like what's really going to happen. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, I can't grab onto the tangible future. I can create something, I can do things, but like when I try to visualize a tangible future, usually I'm just visualizing what I think someone else did that was good. And like, now I think I should go do that.
I understand. No, I understand I understand what you're, I wonder if, not that you're necessarily mimicking. I'm not saying that, but Gemini energy can mimic. So I wonder if that is kind of a way to, I wonder if that actually helps. Does that actually help you to perhaps see through the space dust? Does it kind of help, kind of like if you watch like, what you were talking about with somebody else, does it kind of help you to see your path? Does that at all, if you really thought about it?
Sometimes it can help just to see other people doing things. I'm like, okay, they're doing it, it's possible. But usually it does the opposite. And I have totally mimicked people with my job and been like, oh, that person does that, I should do it, and then gone and tried to do it before. And it didn't, of course, that doesn't work. But I didn't know I was doing that. I just like had nothing to grab onto. So when I would see someone doing something meaningful, I'd be like, that's what I should do. And so it's been more of a challenge to learn when and how not to just follow someone else's path, and learn when not to hire a coach, when not to get a coaching program, when, like not to try to turn myself into a coach when I'm doing spiritual work, or because it just they made it make it sound so much better or whatever, when it's like the hard part, I think, is facing the uncertainty and just being able to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, which I finally have figured out. But it's always been, I think the mimicking has showed up more as me just trying to do what someone else seems happy doing, that looks like happiness. Okay. I'll try that. And sometimes it's like, I mean, even going to South Korea and teaching English, that was the first thing that I didn't see someone else do. I just wanted to do it. So that was a cool moment for me, where it's like, it wasn't long term. I knew I wasn't going to do it forever. And it didn't really clear up my purpose, or what I really wanted to do long term. But it started that energy of like, okay, I can actually make a decision that isn't based on what I'm copying of someone else.
That's cool. Yeah. It's something that you wanted to do because you wanted to do it and it felt right to you to do it in that moment at that time. That's cool. I think that, yeah.
Well, and there's more on that though that makes it more of a distorted thing too, now that I'm thinking about it, which is that I majored in Spanish, and what I really wanted to do was live in Latin America. But what I did was I went to South Korea because the guy I was dating at the time was from there. And so it seemed safer, or it seemed more, I don't know, practical, because you can make more money there than you could in like Mexico or somewhere. And if I could do that again, I would have gone to Latin America, because that's what I actually wanted. And so I could see there's a trail in my life of me wanting something that would like move me toward a higher potential, and then going and doing something different that feels safer, or just isn't what I wanted. Because I don't know, there was like this distortion with being able to just own and go after something that I wanted.
That makes sense here too. Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask, with the thing, and this is kind of just with the thing with going to South Korea, was there anything other than dating somebody from there or was it specifically the dating somebody from there that made you want to do that? Or was there any, like, I guess I'm wondering, because like if you could tap into, if there was something else beyond just dating somebody there, right? There might be a way to tap into that feeling to have it come about even more.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, I was drawn to spirituality.
Okay.
And like, so the idea of going somewhere, going to Asia, just that it was in Asia. And I guess maybe the dating the person is why I picked South Korea and not like Thailand, which is probably what I would have done if I didn't have that person, which probably would have been a little bit more the experience that I was looking for. Although I loved my time in South Korea, but it wasn't filled with temples and stuff. And actually, technically, there are temples, so I shouldn't say that. But I didn't go to those when I was there. But what I did there, one thing I did there that doesn't have to really do with South Korea, but it ended up moving me toward my purpose, was I took a couple of Reiki classes. So I learned Reiki level 1 and 2. And that was like the beginning of everything else sort of opening up. But it was not an easy journey. I always felt like I was on the wrong path the whole time. I always would like question what I was doing. And, if someone would ask me how I was doing, I'd be like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like I was consumed with it. And I think that's probably why I ended up falling in love with astrology so much, is that it has all those answers right there. So that is sort of has come full circle, and now I can help people with that same kind of challenge.
Yeah. And I bet you're good at that. I bet you're very good at that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I think those were all of the questions that I have, but I want to thank you so much for coming on and being open and wanting to share. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah, this was fun.
I enjoy you as it is. So so thank you so much.
This was really fun. It was a different experience of astrology. And I love that you're focusing in on this one placement. It's just so cool.
Yeah, it really is like a this is my midheaven is Virgo, and there really is like a laser focus with if I think it might annoy the people around me a little bit. But because I'm always talking about black holes, and I think people get talking about black holes. I'm looking at pictures of black holes. They're probably like, okay, what the fuck? Like, but yeah. But do you want to share where you can be found?
Yes. Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. It's the Saffron Sage, and I'm also on Instagram at the Saffron Sage, and I have a group called Astrology and Alchemy on Facebook, so you can come hang out with me in any of those spots. And my website is thesaffronsage.com.
And I will put the links below in the video description box for anybody that, check her out, go check her out, go follow her, go subscribe. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. So we will head off here. I will see you all later.